I am going to introduce our moderator, Marie Bruin, the Director for Workforce Education from the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges. Everyone, let's welcome Marie Bruin.
Good morning, everyone. And Bryant, it's okay to put your playlist in the chat box so that we can all enjoy that later, right? So good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be here. First and foremost, thank you to the organizers of this summit. It has brought forth from our welcome all the way forward. All of our speakers this morning have done such a marvelous job of shining a light on areas where we need to focus our interest, but also opening up our awareness of where we have so much promise and so much potential success moving forward. So thank you, everyone. And I'm just really excited to be here and to have the opportunity to be moderator for 3 other professionals that are going to let you know more about leadership from the heart of the community. Our topic this morning is about connecting that big picture intent to their experiences and what's happening out there. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our panel. First of all, we have Nikki Torres, who is a consultant with Washington Kaiser Permanente, their ecosystem project. And then we have Osman Salahuddin, who's a strategy consultant, also with Washington Kaiser Permanente Ecosystem Project. And then lastly, rounding out our panel this morning is Eveline Melting Tallow. She's with a Native American Outreach Health Science Coordinator at WSU's Native American Health Science Program. So welcome to all 3 of our panelists this morning. They're going to be sharing with you programs and strategies that's had success in addressing inequality in education and connecting with communities, and methods that they're using in building programs and addressing those larger issues affecting diversity in healthcare, things that we've already heard raised very prominently thus far this morning. And so we will go through each panelist. We have about 2 questions, and for the next 40 or so minutes, we'll be with you in order to share that information. So to my panelists, first of all, could you highlight the opportunities, innovation, and/or resources for creating more equitable pathways to healthcare leadership positions and a workforce that provides linguistic and culturally concordant care? And I first will raise that question to Nikki.
Hi, thank you so much. So within our project and our group, the ecosystem, we've been really focused on, at least in my particular role, Osman has a different role with a lot of professionals in the professional world, but in my work, I've been working with a lot of different students. And so these are both community college students, these are 4-year institution students, these are high school students, and even recent grads. And most of the success that I've found within our programs, we have, for example, we have a virtual rounds program, which was a response to the COVID, pandemic. And so that was an opportunity to get students who are applying to medical school, for example, or nursing school hours, because, when you apply, you need a certain amount of hours to really stand out. And, a lot of the students that we work with don't exactly have the connections to have made with providers to get those hours, even before COVID. And so this was another opportunity for us to connect students with those providers and get hours. And, in the works, we also have a video series, and really the purpose behind that was kind of a mass mentoring, which is getting the basic information that a lot of the pre-health students need to know, a lot of the basics about professionalism, building your network. And this is kind of a way to find a bunch of different providers, educators, organizers in the community in Washington to provide that information to a lot of the students in the state who currently don't have that information or just really confused about some of those topics. And, we have a lot of other things in the works, but those are the main 2, resources we have going right now. And just as a plug for all the students and providers and educators and advocates in the room, we always are looking for different panelists or speakers, and even for students, mentors for high school students just building the network. And if you're interested and have time and you want to contribute back to your community, we're always looking for people to collaborate with. So definitely reach out if you're interested in any of that.
Thank you, Nikki. Osman.
Yeah, thank you so much, and really excited to meet everyone virtually. I do want to apologize for any background noise. I actually have a second dose of the vaccine appointment in about 50 minutes, so I'm at a coffee shop waiting for that, but thank you. So I just wanted to talk about the other part of the work that we're doing alongside Nikki. She mentioned her student-focused work, and I'm really working with professionals, healthcare providers, and a lot of leaders across the state of Washington to really build out this ecosystem, this initiative that brings together a lot of perspectives, voices from historically underrepresented communities. So to take a step back and really describe what the ecosystem is and what we're envisioning with that, it is this program in which it started several months ago, almost over a year ago, where Dr. Thomas, who's on this call, brought together and spoke with a lot of different healthcare leaders from all different fields in the healthcare industry, and wanted to really see how we could better serve students so that when they started school in kindergarten all the way through their postgraduate studies, every single step of the way we could have resources for them so that they would be able to succeed in whatever field that they wanted to go into. We wanted to eliminate any gaps and really focus on the best opportunities, resources, and connections that could be made for the students in a collaborative, community-centered, and really educational approach. And so what we did is organized groups of leaders across the state of Washington, so both in the Puget Sound and Spokane, and got a lot of working sessions, a lot of steering committees, and this really ties into the question in which we're highlighting opportunities for the more equitable pathway, where what we're planning on doing is starting this organization called the Ecosystem loosely right now, still solidifying a name there. But this organization will aim to connect students with all of the resources that they need, any providers. So really tying in the work that Nikki's doing with the work that I've been doing with the ecosystem and the connections that have been made, and providing students the opportunities for them to be at the table. They'll have seats on the organization board. They'll be really giving a lot of input into what is needed for them to succeed so that we're not losing any students who might not necessarily have the resources to go through the pathway that they have.
Thank you, Osman. Evelyn.
Well, thank you for having me. And I do want to say that Dr. Naomi Bender is a part of the ecosystem that is representing Washington State University in our Spokane area. And so I was introduced to Nikki and the organization, and we also been a part of it too with our students at Washington State University for our pre-health. So one of the things that, as I want to open this dialogue up, is I think what's really important here is, and I always say this, is that building trust in the community. Because if we build trust in the community, then our students will come. They will come to each of our programs or each of our institutions. So I've been in a part of higher ed for about 15 years, and I've worked with Indian education for 30. And so been an academic advisor for about 15 years. So one of the things that I know, and when I speak about some of the programs that we're doing and other programs that I've been a part of, when we go out into our communities, we have to build that trust. What is that trust? Okay. So what I mean by that is if we're working in Indian country, which is what I do, is that we have to go out into the communities and introduce ourselves and to be a part of that community. And the reason why I say that is that you don't want to go into a community and say, here, I have all this great stuff, but how are we going to trust you? How are we going to trust our high school students to go to your campus? How are we going to trust, you to come onto our reservation, our urban communities? into our close-knit communities, right? So that's why I think it's really important. That's why I'm introducing it this way and then talking about our success in our programs, because this is what we do in the very beginning. It's about building trust. It's about taking your face, bringing it to that organization and talking with them and finding out what their needs are. Because every time we want to go out and say we have this great product, right? We're not listening. We need to listen to the communities that we're serving. And so we've been doing that in our Nahashni program at WSU for 25 years. Who started it was Dr. Robbie Paul, who was here at WSU and retired, but she started this 25 years ago. We have had, and I'll give you a little more detail, but we have had over 400 Native American students go through this program. And I'm really proud to say, and I'll give you some examples of some of the students who have gone through it and where they're at today. So one of the things that as we start talking about programs, and Nikki talks about programs of providing students to come on board to sample some of the things that they're doing so that they could be interested in it. So in our Nahashni program, what we do is we provide an opportunity for 2 weeks. Now we have a 5-week program. So for 2 weeks, we bring those high school students on campus, right? But one of the things that we have done before bringing them, we go out to the reservations, we talk to the higher ed, the tribal higher ed, we talk to the counselors, we go to the high schools, we have that one-on-one with the students and the parents too. So when they come to our camp, they know that they can trust us with their students for 2 weeks as we show them a sample of different hands-on presentations through the College of Medicine, College of Nursing, and College of Pharmacy, and other allied health. Like we also work with RIDE with the University of Washington in their dentistry program. You know, we provide all that information to these students. Why? Because we want to be able to light that fire of higher ed, that fire of this type of education, because we all know it, and I can also say this too, is that we do not have enough Native American in our health sciences or as physicians, nurses, or any of our allied health. And we are working very hard to bring them to the Nahashni camp so that they will be able to provide that spark. We provide that spark. All of you guys provide a spark, because when you're in the community, you talk about your passion of wanting students to come. You know, our students of color, is so important for them to see that spark, right? How do we provide it? By providing these programs. So we have a Nahashni program, which because of last year with the pandemic, everybody had to pivot, you know? And so when we did the Nahashni, we included the STEAM health, which is the research portion of it. Why? It's because a lot of our students of color, our natives, do not get the opportunity for research. And so we also include that in. So they do experiments. We also have panels. We had from the University of Washington, they did a dentistry panel of natives. And so we have got so many comments from our students of last year, who we had 26 from 6 different states from 23 nations. That is great, because this year we're going to have 35 students, and out of the 35 students, they're from 12 different states. And so that one's going to start on June 28th to July 30th. So those are different programs, and I will have a presentation later on to give you more detail. But you want to know about success. You want to know about why is this program successful? It's because it gives that light. So one of the students who went through Nahashni twice, because they can go through more than once, right? They're applying to a RISE program, Reimagining Indians into Medicine. It was exciting because when she called me, and because I'm one of the recruiters on that, we started talking, and she told me about Nahashni. She did it twice. Now she's going to be into our program, where it is a 6-week program this summer. And what it does is they'll be going through the MCAT program. They'll also have cultural tendencies with it too. And so within that program, where it helps prepare them to take the MCAT to go into our different colleges of medicine. That's a success story. That's what, and then it's called homegrown. And I guess that's where all these programs are. You know, you could talk to a whole group of people, right? But to be successful is to take that one student out, right? To be able to work with them. 35 spots, right, is not enough. It is not enough. We need more. And so as we start working through this, and as you start, and I've been doing Zooms and presentations, I'm going out to the Lapaway High School and on the Nez Perce Reservation, I'm going to Warm Springs. I'm doing that face-to-face and talking to those students because they need to see somebody like me. Somebody that will talk to them about why is this going to be successful? Why is we going to touch them and have them understand why health science is important? And when they go back to their high schools, they're willing to take that biology. They're willing to take that chemistry. They're willing to put the grades in because we had a spark. And I guess if I was to say, that's one of the things that we as recruiters or people who work in programming or anything like that for students of color is that we have to give them a spark. And that's by us caring and wanting them to be successful.
Thank you so much. Many state leaders across our state, as we consider economic recovery, we are focusing in on an equitable economic recovery. And there are barriers that we're beginning to find across the state in being able to do that effectively. So to my panelists, what is needed to succeed in establishing an equitable pathway to healthcare leadership positions and a workforce that reflects the community? And Nikki, again, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I do want to echo something that Evelyn said is when we got started with this work, there was, I mean, years of trust that was starting to be built up before a lot of this work got started. With Dr. Thomas, you know, I met him 3 years ago when I was still a student at UW, and really he was out in our student communities trying to connect with us and say, like, what do you need? Like, what are your current disparities as far as, you know, do you need scholarships? Do you need shadowing hours? You know, what is that? And so that work got started. And then when we really started to pick up the pace, a lot of what I was able to do, which was a really great opportunity, was able to like sit down with students in small groups of 2 to 3 and just do these listening sessions where I would ask them, like, what's going on in your current life? How has the pandemic affected you? You know, how has the current state of the world affected your, you know, your process into applying to these health professional schools? And it was amazing what I learned just having graduated. I was learning things that I hadn't even heard before that really gave me a different perspective on how to be building these programs. So I think in order to build an equitable pathway for these leadership opportunities is when you're building programs for these students, it's so important to really bring them to the table and ask them, what do you need? Because we have all these providers, we have all of you who have had experiences which build up your work and really help plan like the best way to help these students. But it's really important to look at current students and ask them, like, what do you think is the real need? Because it's always evolving. You have all of these different perspectives, especially in different locations in Washington state. Like the needs of students in King County are very different than the students in Central Washington or even the East Side. And so it's, again, I just want to emphasize it's so important to get those students to the table and ask them over and over again and just keep checking in. And they've taught me so much, and I've been able to bring that work back to you know, our committees to say, you know, while you guys think this is super important, we have a whole group of students who are saying this other topic is really important. And so, you know, and the other part that is really important about this is I think most of the success I've had with students and gaining that opportunity is really through relationship building and having those one-on-ones. So it is really easy to kind of take the easy route of I'm going to send out a survey and figure out what are the needs right now. And you do get some information, and some of it can be kind of surface level, but you really dig into the real needs when you sit down with them and like have a conversation and kind of hear the dialogue and the narrative between students, realizing that there are needs that they didn't even realize. And so I guess that would be my main thing. And even with that work, it really encourages students, once you sit down with them and you explain your program or your idea, they're being able to bring that back to their community of students, whether that's high school students, even their families, and say, hey, I just heard about this opportunity. Like, I think this would be really great for you. And it's much easier for that student who wasn't even thinking about STEM, who wasn't even thinking about health professional school, and being like, oh, well, you know, you have a connection and you kind of seem to trust this person. So maybe I'll try it out. Maybe I'll go to this seminar. So I think that's really important for this work, is keeping that in mind.
Thank you, Nikki. Osman.
Yeah, so I really appreciate how Nikki brought up the fact that relationship building is a lot of the work that is needed from the get-go. And I think that in establishing this equitable pathway, it's really important to recognize just how important these collaborative efforts are. So even all of us here on this call, taking this step and taking this initiative to collaborate, to connect, and to really share all of our perspectives and stories is necessary, because it allows us to grow our networks, grow our collaborative efforts to make sure that we are understanding where everyone else is coming from, because we all are a part of different communities. And then I also like how Nikki brought up the fact that this is a lot of the student focus that we're trying to bring is a part of a pathway, and the pathway is really necessary for us to make sure that if a student is very successful and has all of the resources from grades kindergarten through 7th grade, and then in 8th grade something happens that sort of deters them from the pathway towards healthcare leadership or any goal that they're pursuing. How do we really approach them? How do we reach out to them, and how do we connect them with opportunities to get them back on track? Because I think a lot of fall off happens and students are sort of forgotten or not really focused on in terms of the opportunities that they once had or the resources that they could be connected to. And I think making sure that we're not losing any students through this pathway is really important to ensure the success all the way down the line. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on, and I apologize again, it's getting a little bit loud. There's a motorcycle right here. All right, sorry about that. Just wanted to touch on the fact that a lot of the work that is necessary needs to come at the institutional level. So a lot of the work that I've been doing has been connecting with these organizations, institutions, and as mentioned earlier, Nikki and I are a part of Kaiser Permanente's organizational effort to get this ecosystem going and this work moving. And so an institutional commitment to programming, like the programs we've been working on, virtual rounds or mentorship, is really necessary so that there is a backing and students can see that these large institutions are really putting their perspectives, their money, their resources into their success. But we had a lot of conversations in our smaller group of strategy consultants, and on top of this institutional commitment, there really needs to be this institutional commitment towards change and undoing racist structures and those historic practices, even within these institutions that we're all a part of and work with every single day. The positions at the top don't really reflect the underrepresented students that we're trying to serve, and equitable pathways will really only be successful if there's constant work being put in and making sure that we're ensuring the success of students and of healthcare leaders in the future by forming work groups, not just having like a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, but really making sure we're doing the work as part of these institutions and organizations to have seats at the table and perspectives and voices echoed, so that restructuring of policies or initiatives is really recognized and visible. Because at the end of the day, if we're not represented at the table, then there really won't be a lot of systemic change, which is what we're really trying to get to. So that's a lot of the work that moving forward, in order to reflect the community, we really want to, as part of the ecosystem and hopefully as part of each of our organizations, we're doing that work to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Great, great comments all. Evelyn.
I think one of the things Dr. Naomi Bender brought when doing the RISE, Reimagining Indians in Medicine, because of her connection, she was able to bring 12 Native physicians, and some of them were at her other institution when she was at University of North Dakota. Why I think that's important is because these students who were in the program last year, they were able to connect to these Native physicians who also is their mentors. And so they still have connections with them. And I think that's really important because one of the things that we see in any, from our Native populations to students of color, is to be able to have mentors, you know, because they're the ones who will be able to relate to them, also find out some of the things that they have gone through and some things that have been successful and some things that haven't. One of the other things I think is really important is that when we have pre-health students in our institution, for example, WSU Pullman, to come to our Spokane campus, we have 189 pre-health students. Why is that important? Because those are the students that we want to be able to help mentor to apply to our different colleges. And if they don't get into our colleges, we still want to be able to help them to go someplace, you know. And I think that's really important in any of these institutions, is that it's not being competitive. It's about helping these students be successful. And that's what we believe in. We believe in these students to be successful. Of course, we want them to go to WSU, to our different colleges. We think that's very important. But it's more important for these students to be successful. And if it's in other institution, that's okay. So one of the things that we did last year in November, which I am very happy and very proud of, is that what we did is we had a pre-health information, and we brought in all of our colleges. And the reason why is that so these students will understand, what does it take for admission? What does it take to write an admission letter? What are the MCAT scores? What is to get into these different colleges? So we had 54 students from 12 different states, also from Canada too, because if you guys don't know about the Jade Treaty, that makes our Canadian First Nations students domestic students. And so we were able to have Canadian students come and be a part of our program. That is so important, so they can understand what are scholarships out there. We have a whole gamut of information that we gave them, and this was 4 hours. This was on a Saturday. So our professionals gave up their time to be there with these students from our College of Medicine, College of Nursing, College of Pharmacy, and also our WSU veterinarian. And so these students, for leadership, if you're talking about leadership, you're talking about them finding out, what does it take to be able to get into these professional fields, you know? And so I think that's what's really important, because we have to help them understand, what does it take to get into these professional fields, and to be able to talk to the professionals, also to have mentors. That's what leadership is, to be able to build those leaderships with the mentors, with our students, to help them along the pathways.
Thank you again, Evelyn. Thank you so much to all three of our panelists. There's like mad support for all of what you're doing that is in our comment section. So take a moment to look at that and some of the offers and such. But I'll open this up now. We have just a few moments left, but I'll open it up. Are there any questions of our panelists at all?
So this is for Cal with Senator Murray's office, and I'm just very curious here with the mentorship and with the collaboration and the potential cohorts and stuff. What significant barriers could be theoretically resolved if there was incentive? And what would that incentive look like? And what are those barriers?
I'll go first. One of the things that we do in our Hashing Steam Health Summer Institute, Because we are virtual and because these students are at home in all these different states, we send them a kit. And in this kit, they get a stethoscope, blood pressure cup, microscope. We even give them a $200 stipend, right? And yeah, this sounds fantastic, and it is fantastic. And they get all these kids and all these professionals, right? But I think sometimes we need to do that, because what we're hoping is with a student who's working with one of our nursing professionals, right, doing the blood pressure, understanding how to do that, they may have an elder at home when they do that and notice that there's a difference. Why is grandma or why is uncle's blood pressure a little bit different? And then even though they're not healthcare professionals, would suggest them to go and be checked, right? What are incentives? Yes, we do need incentives for that. For the RISE program, Reimagining Indians into Medicine, they're going to be able, at the end, we will pay for their MCAT test, right? So there are incentives that we are putting in each one of our programs so the students will be able to have takeaways. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, I think when I meet with students, it's not a one-way street. You know, I'm not asking them, hey, can you commit, 2 hours every week to organizing? It's a really relationship where if they can commit time to me or give me perspective, I'm going to help connect them to whatever type of resource they need, whether that's I just need to, talk with an anesthesiologist, like I'm really interested in that, but I have no idea what that's about. And so, I mean, a lot of the incentive is through providing those connections, but I think another huge incentive is a lot of the college students I work with, their immediate response to what they want to work with is, I want to go back to my community and I need to talk to the high school students. I know that as a junior in high school, I had no idea I even wanted to go to college. And so there's a lot of incentive already, like those students want to be giving back, but they don't want to go to their high school students and say, this is what you need to do. They want to be able to come back to their students and say, look at all of these different programs, look at all of these different scholarships that you can use to take the next step, because it's really easy to tell a student, oh, you can do it, I did it, like there's other people who have done it, but without really providing them any of the tools to how to deal with those barriers, it can be really tough. And I think I guess another incentive kind of would be that we have certain panels or things that come up where we talk about, okay, for BIPOC students, when you're going through programs, it's going to be really hard because you're going to deal with institutional racism, you're going to deal with colleagues, peers that are going to be, putting you down for whatever reason. And then that's just kind of the message there. And there is not a ton of feedback as far as how do you deal with those situations. And so I think kind of institutionally an incentive for students is if they see that change as far as okay, so if I'm getting remarks, or if I'm hearing this, or I see that there's some type of stigma going on that's affecting my ability to pursue the career or the education that I'm going for, there needs to be a place where they can safely go and talk about that with, and make sure that it's just not going to go into a recommendations box, but their recommendation or their input is actually going to be used to make a change. And so I think through that, it needs to be really transparent, is if there is a problem, we hear you, we see it, we're not going to try to hide it, we're going to say, okay, we understand, we recognize that this is a problem and this needs to be worked on. And that just makes students and even grad students feel like there is hope, and that they just don't have to deal with being in this really tough situation for 10 to 20 years and then hopefully it gets better. There needs to be a little bit more kind of give and transparency so that they have hope that there is going to be change along the way. Because I think it can be really discouraging when you're just told, yeah, it's going to be hard and you just have to deal with that. Because a lot of students take that and say, oh, well, if that's going to be hard, if I'm not going to be comfortable, or I'm going to be put into these really awkward, extreme situations, why would I put myself into that situation where I could just kind of pursue this other path that I see a lot of other people in my community taking? It's really hard to take that jump when you see that there's not really any change going on, anything that's going to make the situation better for them in the current moment.
Yeah, and I think everything that's been said has been covered really well. One thing to piggyback off of Nikki's answer is an incentive in having students being at the table. I think that was a really big part of my undergraduate experience, was actually being at the table with administrators, with university leaders, and having the student perspective being shared up front, so that they didn't have to figure out what students needed or wanted. We were able to echo what our experience was. And I think that's a really big opportunity to empower students and to give them the resources that they need in their own hands to succeed, so that there's never any doubt in terms of what they actually need.
Thank you. We've got one question in the chat, and Brian, if there's some help in monitoring that, that would be helpful as well.
Yes.
But I see one from Corey. Is there funding or other supports needed to increase access to HOSA ecosystem, Nahashini, STEAM, RISE, and how can funders improve grants available to support that work? Anyone?
Well, I like to jump in on that. And it's true. I mean, so for RISE, Reimagine Indians into Medicine, it took 3 institutions to come together, right? And their goal is to be able to have more Native American physicians, right? To write this grant together for everybody to collaborate. And it does happen, you know, and we've seen how successful it is as we work together. And I think that's something that should be thought out more, is to have more collaborations with not only in our communities, our institutions, because the outcome for everybody is to have more people in our health sciences, in our different professions. And yes, it is funding. It's funding for all these programs in writing grants. You know, and so if we are to be successful in any of our programs, we definitely need to be able to have the fundings and the community support. And that is with Nikki talking about the virtual shadowing, which was huge, because when students took advantage of that, they're going to be able to write that on their application. These type of programs are needed, and they need to continue.
Yeah, and I just want to,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to that, I agree that needs to be a lot of collaboration. I think that we can all agree that there's a lot of groups and programs that are all doing a great job right now. And I think the big thing is with grants, I feel like there should be the opportunity to have different organizations apply to bigger grants together, because every single program can contribute to the same need. And so having those grants makes it much more easy, where we can say, okay, we have 3 different programs that have had great success. Now we can apply to this larger grant, and there's less holes and less opportunities for funding to not be used as efficiently when we have 3 different people, 3 different groups kind of working together to fill all those gaps.
So this is Raquel again, and I'm going back to a couple of other thought processes. So first of all, I am percolating on some theories here. Secondly, when you're talking about collaboration and programs and grants, knowing that there are fundamental grants opportunities through career technical education and the Office of Superintendent and Public Instruction through the federal dollars that come to the state. And then there's also additionally the workforce development, and then there are like Casey Foundation and numerous others. Is it more theoretically, thought process would be, if you had a accountability of health who is specifically working on the social determinants of health as the main collaborator and partner, because they have a grant writer, could they theoretically be your cohort lead to do the work throughout the state to address the disparities and connecting the youth to opportunities in the workplace based upon the data that they've been collecting?
I think that's a great opportunity. And I just want to give one last thing. I've been on the board of the American Indian Community Center. It's a urban center here in Spokane for 27 years. And that's one of the things that we talk about too, is that collaboration, is working in the community. You know, you don't know until you try. And I guess I would have to say that you don't know if that type of collaboration with institutions, private or public, will work, or even in the communities that you're going to target, right? Until you reach out and start having that conversation. And I think that's really important, for having the conversation to see who's at the table and how are we going to work together for the goal of bringing our students, right, into the health professions.
And I guess a small comment to that is, theoretically, if you did have this person who was able to be a cohort leader and help grants, help programs get funded and such, and you mentioned something like this would be backed by data, for example. And so something I want to emphasize is, it is really easy to get trapped in a place where we use data, we use surveys to kind of dictate where funding goes. But I think over and over again, what I've seen with even like the research community is, your survey or the data you're collecting isn't always the most representative if you're just kind of like sending something out and hoping whoever sees it will reply to it. You kind of really need to make sure that you're going to individual communities and like getting data that is representative, and like the people that may not normally respond to questionnaires or surveys or such like that are being monitored. And also, I mean, I think that there's a huge emphasis on college students or four-year students, but I think it's important to also look at community college students or the Running Start students, and really get the information from, you know, their place in Washington, and their, you know, their progress, because I feel like they kind of get left out of the cause sometimes.
And I also say non-traditional students, because as we start seeing our curve is 27 years old and up. So I think non-traditional students at the table too are going to be very important.
Thank you. I am percolating on things. And if Nova's still with us, Nova, I would love to visit with you shortly, later this week.
Nikki, thanks for the shout out to the community and technical colleges. Thank you for that. Also, too, very interested in what we can do as a system to best support the pipelines and to continue this. I want to thank each of you for bringing yourselves into this work and your deep commitment to making change. This is a no short task by any means, and it takes all of the elements that you have spoken to today and so much more to really begin to change our environment and our future in the space of creating greater equity. So deeply appreciate all of you and your expertise this morning. And if there are no additional questions, that concludes our presentation this morning. Thank you, everyone.